Hello, and welcome to Sacred Herbalism, the full moon segment of the Elder Tree podcast, where we explore how plants and fungi can support us to enter into a sacred relationship with life and the living world. I'm your host, Stephanie Hazel, herbalist, anthropologist, and a deep lover of this wild world. Let's walk into the moonlit forest together, into a world of magic, mysticism, psychedelic teachers, and, of course, the plants themselves. Are you ready? Happy full moon in Capricorn, listeners. Thank you for being here. And this month I have an interview with Kimberly Kling, who is a herbalist, poet, and medicine maker based in Arizona, USA. She lives on a ranch with her family, growing herbs, making medicines, and supporting the community with her herbal consultation packages. She recently launched a podcast blending poetry and plants. I'm quite excited about it. It's called A Remedy and Rhyme, looking at one herb each month, including poetry written by herself and some of the deeper, more mystical, psycho-emotional aspects of plants, which, as you know, I'm super into. She actually studied with me last year doing my Plant Allies course, and I just really enjoyed the sensitivity and awareness she had of the movement of plants in her body, mind, and spirit. I love when I get people like this in the group because it really helps to flesh out what we're noticing and bring some of the more subtle awareness that comes from many years working with plants in this way. So in this episode, you're about to hear us tackle a really big question. When faced with the magnitude of the challenges in the world today, does being a herbalist actually matter? Is it enough of a contribution? It's a big question, and I would really love to know your thoughts. So please pop them in the comment section of Spotify if you're listening on Spotify. And just, what are your thoughts? Is it enough of a question? Why does it matter? Does it matter? Let me know. The plant that makes an appearance in this conversation is rose, that eternal teacher of the balance between vulnerability and boundaries. And just a little reminder that if you want support developing a wild and sacred relationship with plants to transform your herbal practice and your sense of belonging in this green world, some of the things that we talk about in this episode, then I'm really ready to sign you up to the Wild Age of Herbalism. So this course starts mid-August, and you can use the code ELDERTREE for a 15% discount for the full course, or just dip your toes in with the first 5 weeks of the Plant Allies module. It's a really beautiful way to develop the skill of wise, intuitive listening to plants. I can't wait to see you there, and I really hope you love this episode. Good morning, Kimberly, or good evening for you. Here we are doing a cross-oceanic recording session here in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales and Arizona in USA. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. The Elder Tree is one of my favorite podcasts, so I'm really honored to be here today. Thank you, Stephanie.
You're so welcome. And I've just been listening to your new podcast that you just launched a few months ago, and I'm really excited to welcome you to that kind of world. I listened to the first episode this morning with my cup of tea.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I love the emphasis on storytelling that you've got there, myths and poetry and storytelling. How's that been feeling for you, launching your own podcast?
It's felt really exciting. I've had some pretty good reception from my community so far, and I just feel really excited to share the stories of the plants, really. It just feels like timely and an important way to help other people connect to the plant realm in maybe a way that they hadn't thought of before, too.
Yeah. You started your first episode with a poem that you wrote about the plants, and something that jumped out in that poem for me was this idea that Gaia is collecting and calling to the herbalists because there's a need for more herbalists. And I've actually been thinking about that a bit lately, thinking in the situation that we find ourselves in globally, it seems like there are so many crises. Is herbal medicine an appropriate response? Is this where I should be putting my energy? Is it worthy? Should I be going into full activist mode? Like what does the world around me really require? And so I would love to hear a bit when you say in this very heartfelt poem that Gaia needs more herbalists. Talk me through that. Why does Gaia need more herbalists?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's an excellent question. We're experiencing so much right now as a collective humanity, and our world is changing so quickly. And I think a lot of the sort of crises and struggles that we're going through as humanity are like a disconnection from the very place we call home. You know, sort of like this, there's so much of like a masculine energy sort of permeating the world right now in terms of like the wars and the sort of outward expression of like accumulating and production and all of these qualities. And the earth has like this very yin feminine aspect that I think could balance what's happening right now on the greater scale. And I think turning to herbal medicine or even just herbal remedies in our own life can like tune us back into the earth as our home and bring us back into like a little bit softer place with ourselves and with the planet and with like the community at large.
So you kind of, as by using plants as medicines and engaging with the art of herbalism, that we are remembering how connected we are to the earth, and that is healing in some way some of that deep wound that seems to be playing out in so many destructive ways around us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Beautiful. Yeah,
yeah.
that definitely aligns in some ways with where I've been thinking about it. That sense of, there is a real sense of disconnection. And I think you even said in your episode I listened to, you said something like, really remembering and feeling that we're not visitors on this planet, that we really truly belong to this earth. And I've been thinking about that sense of connection to earth and plants, not necessarily specifically herbalism, but I think that is a really beautiful way to find that connection.
Mm,
Another thing I've been thinking about is health sovereignty, right? And that is also an important response to the times that we find ourselves in.
mm,
That for most people in the West, we're so dependent on the medical systems and on the pharmaceutical companies, who, in many ways, the pharmaceutical industry underpins, supports, funds, also drives research, etc., and controls a lot of the medical system that we benefit from. And that kind of dependency feels scary to me, and that
mm.
herbal medicine is the medicine of the people, which you also said that episode. And a lot of the elder tree kind of vision is around, putting the medicine in the hands of the people. That's like to return that sense of sovereignty over health and well-being to people. Sure, there's times when you want specialist help, and it's great that it's there, but just that everyday sense of independence. We say, oh, my daughter's got a cough, like, what have I got in my medicine cabinet? And I pull out all of these, what I got in the garden, and being able to feel like I can take care of my family is a very empowering thing.
Yeah, I love that so much. I recently taught a class that was all about working with accessible herbs that we can find in the grocery store, or even ones that we might have in our backyard or in our spice cabinet to help us with everyday ailments. And I think that's a really great starting point for a lot of people. And that's actually, I think, how I sort of weaved my way into herbalism, was through like just helping my family and learning about like the rosemary that grows in my backyard that I was originally interested in for culinary use. But then I realized, oh my gosh, I can bring rosemary leaves into the home and steam them and help with respiratory ailments, or make tea, and it might help bring more circulation through my body and help my brain just have a little bit of a pick me up. And you start dabbling with the plants that are growing around you, or maybe you don't have a garden but you just have them in your spice cabinet, and you start playing around with them. And that's the best way to learn, is to get to know them through that relationship.
Yeah, through the embodied practice of herbal
Mm-hmm.
medicine, which is just doing it, growing,
Exactly.
picking, making tea and cooking, making a syrup. Yeah, that, I love that. So yeah, I think that for me, thinking about those things, we have, how is herbalism a great response to the problems of the world? And there's that sense of weaving us back into a sense of belonging and relationship with the living world, healing that kind of wound that seems to be causing all these bad choices out there. And also health sovereignty. And there's also, I think, an environmental issue, that pharmaceuticals have a massive environmental impact, both the production of them, but also, if I was to take even the contraceptive pill, which, absolutely no shame on anyone who does. I know that family planning and contraception is really important and a very personal choice. But just to use that as an example, if I'm taking the contraceptive pill, not only is the manufacture of that causing a lot of chemical waste, but it is, I think about 70% of that pill is excreted completely hormonally active, and it then ends up in the waterways and in the soils. It's changing fertility in fish and changing reproduction because there's so much contraceptive hormones, progestin, I think it is. So much progestin in the ocean is actually changing the reproductive capacities of the fish that we have. And the impact of that, we haven't even started to really grok. It's beyond, for me, it's beyond kind of a silent spring. It's like, oh God, how are all those medications everyone's taking going to affect the ecosystems that we're part of? I think that's another really important. Every time that we empower ourselves or other people, our families, our clients, to support their healing naturally, we reduce the biochemical load in the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that a lot too. And, when we choose, we don't always have the choice to go the natural route, but if we can, it's nice to be able to take a little bit of burden off of the whole system and to just be aware that that is a potential side effect of the pharmaceutical industry. And we all have to kind of make our individual choices, but a lot of people don't know that's happening and that those compounds stay within our environment and sort of can come back around to affect all of us, and not just humans, but the full ecosystem around us too. So it's definitely a good thing to be aware of.
Yeah, like, I wonder. My whole family took antibiotics when I was about 40 weeks pregnant because my daughter was diagnosed. My 3-year-old got whooping cough, which was going around in the area. And, I would treat whooping cough naturally, but it's a very long infectious window. And I was about to have a baby, and it's about a 30% fatality rate for newborns. So it's a really, really high risk situation to be like, okay,
Yeah.
so 1 in 3 chance my baby will die if they're born while my daughter's still infectious, right? So that was a situation where I felt that antibiotics were really the right choice. And so we all took antibiotics, and we have a septic tank. And not long after, the septic tank got blocked. And I wondered, on that very small level, of course, a septic tank, especially in this kind of climate where it's very hot and damp, it needs the right kinds of bacteria living in the septic tank, breaking down all your grey water and waste. Otherwise, it's going to get blocked, right? And we all took antibiotics for 5 days. We were all excreting antibiotics into the toilets, and they were going into the septic tank. And they probably what happened is that we killed off all the bacteria that we need with our, antibiotic poo going down into into the septic tank, and it had a direct impact, right? That's a really good example of a direct pharmaceutical impact that's beyond just my own health. It's the health of the environment that supports me.
Yeah, wow. I love that. And it's so funny because I was literally just thinking about septic tanks the other day. But yeah, I just
So
fed
beware
mine.
of antibiotics. If you're taking
Yeah,
antibiotics,
definitely.
go to like a mains toilet to go.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really direct cause and effect you can see right there. And yeah, and then on a grander scale, like what is that doing when everyone's using a wastewater treatment plant and we have all these different chemicals going into it? And the hormones are specifically really interesting. Like what is that doing to us and the animals and maybe even
Yeah,
plants around us?
I think of hormones as instructions, right? And they, a lot of the plant medicines that we love are actually a form of plant hormones. It's like telling different parts of the plant, the roots are sending a message to the leaves to produce XYZ chemical to become more resilient against a certain issue. And a lot of that is then on a chemical level, that's the medicine that we're ingesting, right? And so when we're putting all these biological instructions out there into the environment, that changes things in potentially a profound way.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about not only the pharmaceuticals that pass through us, but all of the different chemicals that largely are not very well studied that we're dealing with in our lives today, humans and the greater ecological community. And I feel like a lot of people in my life are experiencing some negative consequences from the burden that we're all carrying of these different, chemicals within our environment that our bodies just aren't attuned to and used to. The more that we can make choices as individuals to lessen that load, I think it just will impact everyone to a better degree.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to return to this idea of herbalist as storyteller because I've been thinking about this a little bit, and in your podcast you're telling a lot of stories and myths, and I love whenever I teach a class on a plant. You would know, as you've done my plant analyze course before, that I love hunting myths and stories to share about the herbs, and you obviously do as well. A big part, that's kind of the premise of your podcast. So why do you think it makes sense and matters to tell myths and stories about plants that we work with?
Yeah, I think going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, it really comes down to building relationship. And if you think about it, it's the things in your life that you have relationship with that are the things that you love. You don't often love things that you might have a superficial love for something, but you don't love things at your core when you don't know them. And so for me, I feel like part of my mission in this world is to bring a little bit more awareness and relationship between humans and plants. And consequently, that I hope will bring more people into a space of appreciation and love with the living world and plants and the earth and all the creatures here. But I know for me personally, it was when I started having a garden and started like really getting to know plants and the land that I live on that I started to feel like I was returning to myself in a way. And I grew up with like really bad anxiety. In college, I was having like a lot of panic attacks, and I was put on a pharmaceutical, which ultimately did help me get through the crisis that I was going through at the time, but it had a lot of negative consequences for me too that I wasn't made aware of when I started taking them. It wasn't like I didn't have like the information that or the informed consent, if you want to call it that.
Mm.
And I was never given any alternatives. I didn't even learn about herbalism until I had my son and was in my so for me, forming relationship with plants really shifted so much about my own being. And it wasn't an instant thing, but over time I've grown to be more grounded in my body, and I still experience anxiety, but it's definitely shifted. And I guess a lot more tools in my tool belt via the plant realm and other things as well to help me through things like
Mm.
anxiety. And that was formed like from getting to know the plants and having that relationship with them.
So you found that the stories help you to understand the plants as a being, and then when you could really engage with them as a living being, that allowed you to love them and create that relationship that really was helpful for you.
Exactly. And I think because that was so profound for me that I wanted to be able to share that with other people. And
Mm.
while I'm creating these podcasts, I'm learning so much about the plant myself. But it's nice to be able to like speak that into the world and share that with other people as well. And I'm hoping it bridges a wider audience of not just like herbalists and people who are already interested in plants, but people maybe will come to it because the topic at hand, like my latest episode was about alchemizing anger and blackberry, and maybe
Mm.
they'll see that title and they'll be like, well, I'm interested, what does that mean? And then they'll start to have a deeper appreciation for blackberry as well.
Yeah, nice. And so, what's a herb that is really alive for you at the moment? Could you share a story or a myth about a plant that you really love that's in your life right now?
Sure. I have quite a few stories about different plants that have been with me, I think, really strongly on my journey. But the one that I've been working with in the past couple of weeks is blue vervain.
Mm.
And it's interesting because so one of the things that I think blue vervain is well known for in the herbal community is helping people with like a type A personality, sort of take things down a notch and not be so, like, I guess, hyper vigilant and not feel like they're constantly having to be on and produce and all of those things associated with like overachievers, I guess, which I would say has been me a large part of my life. And I've been experiencing a lot of burnout as a consequence. But I hold a lot of tension in my jaw. And I've noticed that blue vervain has a very strong affinity for that, for helping to unwind and release tension that's held in like the jaw and the upper neck and that area. And it has such a profound effect on me. It's really helping me. My mom, this is interesting because my mom actually had gone to the dentist and she had a high spot on one of her teeth and it was bothering her for a week or so, and then she went back in and they finally were able to file down the high spot, and that felt a lot better. But her jaw was really inflamed and hurting her because, you know, for so long this was like putting extra pressure on that side. And I gave her some blue vervain, and literally the next day she was like, she had been taking Tylenol for like a week straight and just waking up every morning with jaw pain. I gave her the blue vervain and it was just like so instant for her. And that's not the way it always happens, but for her it was very instant, and she just took it twice and she hasn't had jaw pain since.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I do feel like jaw pain is often linked to that overactivity of the frontal cortex, like the overthinking, and then that jaw pain that comes in, the neck tension, and that's often linked to that overachiever type who tends to burn out, right? Some overachievers have a lot of have a chi and reserves, but the ones who don't then have burnout and depletion
Yeah.
as a result, right?
One of the things that I was reading about the other day in Celtic or Irish herbalism, I know that blue vervain is called upon for, I think it's like a plant that helps us connect to the other world or to our openness maybe around like being able to channel and tap into like the unseen realm and, you know, other forces that are beyond us. But it does it in a way that like also helps us protect ourselves and have good boundaries around it so that we don't get overwhelmed or overloaded or take on things that we don't want to.
It's really interesting that you mentioned blue vervain. It's a plant that I know nothing about pretty much. I just never worked with it. It's never come up in any of my studies like at university here. I don't think it's very common in Australia, to Australian herbalism. But a client of mine emailed me a few days ago just asking, wanting to reorder some reishi that we'd been working with and saying, oh, my parents are coming back from the States and they're bringing me some blue vervain. I think I'm going to try it. What do you think? Do you think that will suit me? And I was like, oh, I actually have no idea. I'd have to go and have a look in a book. And so I love that you bring that up because I really need to know more about blue vervain to help this person work out whether it's for them. So what would be your like top, how would you answer that? How would you know that blue vervain was a really good plant for you? Or not?
Yeah. Well, I would say that somebody who sort of tends to maybe have a little bit more vata or pitta energy, which is like the air, I would say like air and fire, you know, maybe sort of someone who's a real go-getter and overachiever and type A like we mentioned, but it's overdone in a way that they notice either people around them are telling them to like settle, you know, just settle down a little bit, or it's affecting the people around them in a negative way, or it's affecting them in a way that could, you know, lead to burnout, or they feel it negatively affecting them somehow. And yeah, if they notice that they hold that anxious sort of energy in their jaw or their neck. And I also like, you know, if it seems like there's some of those components there, not that I want anybody to go and like waste their money on buying herbs that aren't suited for them, but if they happen to have it and they just want to test the waters and see how it feels in their own body.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually the best way, right? It's like you take something, take it on its own, on a low dose without many other things, obviously be really aware of interaction with medication, but
Mhm.
try a plant and see if it speaks to you, if what you notice in your body, and I would say take it for at least a week. And if I think actually Matthew Wood says if you don't notice significant improvement in 3 weeks, then it's the wrong plant for you. That 3 weeks is like the outer end of, it won't fix everything, but you should definitely feel the difference after 3 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a good point too, is like some people think that they should notice something immediately, and sometimes we do. Like in the instance of my mom, it was very instant. And for me, I can feel an instant relief a lot of times, or a nearly instant relief when I if I have that jaw pain happening. But a lot of herbs work on the subtle realm, and they're working over time. I think especially in our society right now, we have a tendency to like want things to happen immediately, and we're sort of conditioned with that with modern medicine too. And I think it's a good practice to like, well, obviously your course that you do is just like so wonderful for helping people to tune in to that practice of like really getting to know and form a relationship with the herb, and then see how it works with them over time.
So, Kimberly, I'd love to know more about how you got involved in herbalism. You said that you didn't really come across herbal medicine and didn't start really working with plants until you were in your 30s after your son was born. How did that happen for you?
Yeah, so like I was saying before, it sort of happened with starting to grow culinary herbs for myself. That was one way. But also, I moved into a house which I inherited of a large rosemary bush and several rose plants. And I found myself like so drawn to the rose, even though I never had been before. For some reason, I always like associated with rose with like older generations, and it wasn't a plant that really ever called to me before. It seemed sort of like pretentious in a sense, and was I found myself just tending to these rose bushes and like being really in awe of their blooms and the plant in general. And I would like walk by the rose and smell her and keep doing that, and I would start making bouquets. And then at some point I started saving the petals and making tea with them. And I think Rose was actually working with me on like a energetic level and bringing, it's almost like she had this consciousness of like, hey, I'm going to tune you into all of the other plants around you as well, and like help you learn about herbalism.
Mm.
Um, and so I think in the practice of witnessing Rose and forming that relationship by like tending to her and appreciating her and adoring her, because I was really really enamored in so many ways. I feel like it was mutual, and that there
Mm.
was like a mutual witnessing happening. She was also witnessing me, and in some way like just opened my heart like to find new aspects of myself and the world around me. And I think like visually that's kind of what a rose also shows us, like these petals that are just like unfolding onto themselves. And rose is like really well known throughout cultures all over the world for being a heart medicine, energetics, especially energetically opening to the heart. And so as I sort of like brought Rose into my life more and more, I started having actually some really like interesting things happen in my life. I started to like, I think, open up parts of myself that had been shut down just by like the wear and tear of society at large, and like living in this
Mm.
world where we're sort of taught that like the softer aspects of ourselves are not made for this world, or that they're not worthy, I guess. And I think Rose was showing me that like you can have a softness, and the softness is really beautiful and it's important to this world, and beauty is important to this world. And also you can have the thorns to go along with it. And they can both
Mm.
coexist side by side, and they're both important and both needed. And the thorns, are protecting the softness, and the softness is adding beauty to these
Mm.
stems that are lined with thorns. Yeah, so it just kind of was transforming me.
It's a powerful symbol, isn't it? The rose. There's a reason that it's so universal almost as a symbol for love. Um, and that with it's so thorny and kind of bare, and especially the roses that we've cultivated for the most beautiful flowers have this kind of jagged bare branch kind of unappealing energy, and then it blossomed with all this delicacy, and like as you said, petal after petal unfolding with and the colors are all these like blushing, it's like those reds for sure, but a lot of them, the ones I love are the ones that kind of like almost yellow, peach, pink, almost like the color fading out to the edges. And the smell is just the most delicate, heavenly thing, almost a universal image for that, how powerful the coexistence of vulnerability and softness is with boundaries
Mm,
and
yeah,
protection.
yeah, absolutely.
I love what you said as well, that the plant was adoring you back. I think that's a really powerful moment to have. And a lot of people who walk in a more animist or plant connected way, there's a moment that you have where you feel like not only are you the observer looking at the plant or the world or the sunset, but that there's something also looking back at you. That brings us into a sense of a live relationship, I think. What was that
Yeah.
like for you, that moment?
Yeah, I think it just felt really supportive. I felt like I was being supported in my own growth. And um I've gone through, I guess, since like I was going through a hard time in that moment, I think, and possibly like having some loneliness too, just moving
Mm.
here fairly recently to where I live out in the country, and being so far away from the life that I had known, and not having really like a lot of friends. And it felt really lovely to know that there were other beings aside from humans that were also interested in my thriving and my well-being, and that I was interested in theirs, and that I wanted to,
Mm.
care for them and tend to them as well.
Yeah, I love that. It brings it a bit out of that passive, human as agent, and earth and everything else as kind of commodity or material to be acted upon by the human agent. It brings that sense that you're interested in that plant's thriving and it's interested in yours, and there's a mutuality in that invites some real beauty into that kind of, into gardening, into herbalism, into going for walks in the bush, into any kind of way that we can engage with nature and plants. When we have that sense of mutuality, I think there's real richness and beauty that can come through.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that if we notice that we're building relationship, and like, instead of sort of acting more extractively, even in herbalism, we can have that extractive mindset. We might be like working with more natural substances, but I feel like the real depth of the healing journey happens when we come back into like relationship with the plants. And I think too about like cultures who don't necessarily have access to herbs from all over the world. And we as herbalists often learn about a lot of different plants, and we learn all these very specific aspects of them. But what if the plants that are growing around us can help us in ways that we hadn't thought of, or that some of these other more exotic plants can help us, but because we have that relationship with them and we're growing that relationship, they
Mm.
sort of tune themselves to like to help us in the ways that we need it. And not that it's all about us. But I
Mm.
do think if it's mutual, and we're learning to grow with them, that maybe they can help us in ways that we don't have to like go search the world for something halfway around the world to help us. Like, if blue vervain doesn't grow near you, what is the plant that might have that similar way of helping that is in your environment or that you feel called to?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to me is passion flower, right? That passion flower also has that calming and cooling of the mind, and there's a headache and neck and tension, jaw kind of tension. Less specific for jaw, I think, but there's a similar cooling that agitation and that drive that can cause a lot of nervous exhaustion, and it grows so well here. The passion flower, passiflora in general, this is really, we have a winter passion fruit season. So at the moment it's winter, it's cold, everyone's getting sick, and there's just passion fruit, passion fruit, passion fruit, passion fruit. And I just love having that like passion fruit vitamin C hit in the mornings in winter here. So passion flower, Passiflora incarnata, the medicinal variety, also thrives in this environment and would be one that is easy to grow and then share. Yeah.
Ooh,
I love.
I was just going to say that's really exciting. I just planted a few different forms of passion flower in my garden, and it's one that I have not developed a very strong relationship with yet, but I'm excited to.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said as well. I had a real block about growing a herb garden. I had this image of the herb garden I wanted to have, and wouldn't it be amazing as a herbalist if I had this extensive herb garden and was wild harvesting and was gathering all the plants myself. And I never really had the time, the capacity, the skills to do that. But then when I finally just put a few medicinal plants in pots, a couple of years, and put a few things in the ground. I've got a lemon balm plant that's thriving. And a comfrey plant that's thriving, and some chickweed, and a few other things that just grow in the environment, like usnea and ginger. Just having that access to tending a few medicine plants creates all this beautiful sense of connection and opens up new ways of thinking and relating to plant medicine that I think is really important for anyone who is interested in herbal medicine. It has to come out of the book world and the armchair world, even if that's just like one lemon balm in a pot, right? Like if that's all it is, or one little stick of mugwort, or any plant at all that you enjoy and feel connected to that you're tending, I think that opens up probably neural pathways that are important in our relating to medicinal plants to take ourselves out of that sense of commodification, which you said, is a risk in herbalism. And I would say it's not a risk, it's almost ubiquitous. We are so deeply entrenched and steeped in a worldview that sees plants and everything that's not human as commodity, and actually even humans, right? As commodity, that it's very, very hard to break out of. And if as a herbalist you have these small moments of time where you are relating to plants as not commodity, that's a win. And to think that we could do that all the time is, I think, a bit ambitious, right? Because it's so against the way we've been brought up and the way that everything in our world operates. So even having one plant in a pot helps us to have these windows of time where we're relating with a being and tending rather than commodity and mental activity.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a really powerful practice to just tend to another living being and get to know it and like step outside of that human-centered box of only relating to other humans, or maybe like our fur babies and stuff too, but
Yeah.
take it one step beyond and then just see where the path leads.
Totally, the more than human world and the wild world. I think as well when you said you had this sense the rose was invested in your thriving. I think of the plants as the ecosystem masters, right? So the plants are in our ecosystems and they're regulating so much of the air quality and the temperature and the rainfall and the soil health. And I often think like there is an aspect that's very personal, that if I'm sitting with my lemon balm plant, that plant may, and I like to think does, have a sense of who I am as a person and that it cares about me, Stephanie. But I think that the plants are interested in our thriving because we are also part of the ecosystem. I don't think the plants see us as different from the wallabies who jump across the lawn, if you're in my neck of the woods, or the goannas. They're like, yeah, you're also you live here, you're part of this ecosystem, and you're not different from the other parts. And of course, I'm interested in your thriving because my job is to tend the environment.
Yeah.
We can take it out of the mystical there in some way, right? Even though that is deeply mystical, but it's still almost very biological and practical. If you use a systems lens of the plants being those, they're responsible in a way. They feel responsible for the ecosystemic thriving, and our thriving is part of that.
Yeah, I think there's this common notion these days that like humans are sort of parasitic, and that, at least in like the environmental activism sort of realm, like there's a lot of this thought of humans as just being destructive, and we are. I mean, there's no doubt that where we've come as a culture has definitely been a destructive path for our earth. But cultures around the world have also lived in harmony with their environment many times over, and they've tended to, when they're in right relationship with the world around them, they've tended to the land around them in a way that's like mutual. And um, they know that their care for the land is also what is going to help their community thrive, and that every living thing around them is part of that community. And so the thriving again is mutual. And if we take advantage and we start to be extractive, then that's where things can kind of take a turn for the worse. But I think humans have this potential to get back to a place of caring for the world around them and seeing the land that they live on as a place to tend. And when we start to step deeper into relationship with the living world, that's when the real change is going to happen on the planet.
That's so powerful. I think you're right that it's a really destructive and harmful story that we're parasites on the earth, and it creates a lot of harm in the psychology and the mental well-being of humans. And I'm sure in a way that I can't perceive, it creates harm in the world as well, because how can it not? We are part of the world. So if we're feeling bad and guilty and shamed and disconnected, that's going to spill out in some way, right? And rather than feeling like we're parasites, that the types of stories that most Indigenous people have told of being stewards and custodians is a very different environment, very different kind of energy to it, right? And it makes us have a place. I feel like I've shared this story before on this podcast, so if you're an avid listener, I apologize, but it's really apt for this for this conversation. That I remember when I was studying anthropology at uni, that there was one of my teachers was talking about. Actually, I interviewed him on this podcast as well. He was a teacher in Indigenous ethnoecology, which is essentially the relationship with land. And he was talking about a specific peoples called the Yanyua people that he lived in far north rural Australia, and their relationship with the land, and that there was a real tension in that area between conservationists and Aboriginal elders because of the idea that the land was better without people. And we make national parks and say people can't go here, and that's how we protect the environment. And I really understand the logic behind that, because it's really important to have some spaces that aren't just for people to extract resources from. But the fact that the Aboriginal people weren't allowed to then go and camp and fish and hunt was just really confusing to them. And they're saying, but land needs people. The land needs people. It's not going to be healthy if we don't go there and tell stories and do ritual and sing songs. And that really struck me. I think I was 18 at the time, and just like, oh wow, I hadn't realized that I had taken that story in in my childhood and my adolescence, that somehow land was better without people, that the earth would be better off if we all died, right?
Yeah.
And I think that story is getting even stronger and stronger. And the young people that I'm around, they struggle with that sense of, oh, I'm some kind of evil, maybe like an abusive husband or something that's like beating up the earth, right? I just can't help myself, even though maybe I feel bad about it. I can't help myself. I get alcohol into my system and start beating her. I don't know how as a global culture we turn that story around. How do we find the place where we can be in collaboration with Earth and reclaim our role as stewards and storytellers? Because in Aboriginal culture, a lot of what they say that the people's job is actually, it's with our minds that we have, it's telling the stories, it's singing the songs, it's doing the ritual. That aspect is what humans uniquely bring to an environment and ecosystem. And without that, things don't thrive in the same way.
Yeah. Wow. That's so powerful. It gave me chills. How do we bring that back around? Oh, I don't think it's going to be an instantaneous thing, but I think that's goes back to why herbalists are so important. Maybe I'm a little bit too myopic. I don't know, because that's the realm I'm in, but I just, from my own personal journey, I used to be that person, in my 20s or like late teenage years that thought humans were parasitic, and that, maybe we shouldn't be here. And I mean, in all reality, the earth will still get along without us, I'm sure. But I do believe there's a reason we're here, and as part of like this greater whole. And I do feel like humans have this unique capacity, perhaps. I mean, we can't go into the minds of other animals and know for sure, but like I think we have this unique capacity to witness the world around us and like bring our consciousness to appreciate the living world around us. And there's something important in that appreciation and that adoration that maybe isn't like given by other animals. I'm not sure. And I know for me that becoming an herbalist, or at least well before I would call myself an herbalist, just learning how amazing it is that we can bring plants into our lives that like change our body in so many different ways or just help us. That was like an opening to having that greater appreciation for the world around me, and like starting to notice what's in my environment. Oh my gosh, there's a creosote bush over there that I've heard about. Or like, oh my gosh, I heard that you can eat the acorns on the oak tree. Isn't that amazing? They're growing in like such abundance all around us. And that noticing, and that combination of like noticing and appreciation does something that helps us like tune back in, I think. And so for me, my mission, I think, is like really just to get people like enthusiastic again about the living world around them. And hopefully through that enthusiasm, they'll want to form relationship, and that relationship will lead to like greater love for the planet.
I think, yeah, I just want to tie a bow on that. That's really beautifully said. And absolutely, if you think of, as a mother, we're both mothers. How much do our children thrive on loving, appreciative attention? You don't even need to praise them or anything. Just like pay attention to what they're doing and love them while they're watching them. It's like a balm for their soul. It's almost like fertilizer for their heart growth. You see them stepping into themselves more. And I feel that we do have that capacity, and we can apply that to the plants around us. Even what I said before about how great the plants are at regulating ecosystems, that I believe the plants all over the world are working double time right now, trying to support a return to balance in our environment. We're not doing it alone. There's like millions and millions of plants that are trying really hard to balance what's happening and are doing a great job, and fungus as well. And for us, just to see the plants as we go for a walk down the street, see the trees, and be like, I see you cleaning that air. Thank you. Great work. Like that's powerful. One, we stop feeling alone. Two, we actually, I believe we feed the plants just like we feed our children with that appreciation. And we start to be in that role again, rather than like parasitic outsider, but I belong to this environment, I belong to this ecosystem, and I'm just one of the many actors inside. It's a mutuality. And by watching and noticing and witnessing and honoring, maybe that looks like big corroborees where a bunch of indigenous people get together and sing and dance and tell stories and do ritual, but it can just be as simple as just noticing that as you walk down the street and sending a little prayer and a bit of love that plant's way. That can bring us back into that stewardship relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it just happens one small step at a time, and then before you know it, it's like everything's changed. But since this is the sacred herbalism segment, I've been thinking a lot about what that means to me, and that's what I came back to, was that we can do all these really complex rituals, and those rituals like can be amazing. Like doing those really big, like ceremonial things that feel big and important, that can have a role for sure. But sacredness can also be just in the everyday. And I was thinking about like, what are the moments in my life where things feel really sacred? And it's when I am tuning in and noticing and tending to, and like being really present and witnessing the whatever it is that's around me. It's those moments, like in addition to the big grand ceremonies or rituals that I may do in my life, like it's those simple moments of noticing and witnessing that feel the most sacred. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be here. I had so much fun.
Yeah, and I encourage everyone listening to check out Kimberly's new podcast, Remedy and Rhyme, where she looks once a month at a different plant and poetry about it, stories about it, and how to use it in your daily life. Some of the plants that are already in there are rosemary and tulsi and blackberry. So I look forward to tuning into that and going deeper with each of those plants.
Thank you.
That's us for this moon cycle. I'm so glad you walked into the dark forest with me. This podcast is part of The Elder Tree, a non-profit dedicated to empowering people through grassroots herbal education, weaving a strong community of herbalists, healers and plant folk in Australia. You can head over to theeldertree.org to find out more. If you like this episode, we'd love you to subscribe. And if you know who we should interview next, drop us a line. See you next month, and in the meantime, may you be blessed with good health and many plants.